Hi. So, as I mentioned in an earlier video, the last video, I'm just going to post this without editing, truth be told. I am decluttering, and I've decided that it's not worth keeping all of my university papers. I went through them, and I did find a few that I was like, oh, I should keep that, and that would be good. And this was only after I had gone through some where I was like, what, a criticism? Oh no, oh no. I totally went into RSD mode. That's rejection sensitivity dysphoria. And this was all the stuff that I didn't believe back then. Okay. I got interrupted and I paused, and so I'm in a different position. And I've lost my train of thought, which is always fantastic. So I was going through my university papers, and I noticed a lot of these different comments and how they were about rejecting, or how it triggered my rejection sensitivity dysphoria, because, oh, I thought I was a good writer, and I am and was, and I think I wasn't very confident in university, and so I wasn't, and nor was I aware of the RSD. That's only come since, well, really in the last 15 years have I become much more confident in myself, but also in my understanding of my sensitivity to criticism have I really started to understand that I am amazing. Yes. So I think back then I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm a huge imposter syndrome of being in this honors course and with all these academics who are actually academic, and I'm not fully understanding everything. And as I read through the comments from the professors on my essays, I find that it makes sense that I would think that for a lot of things. Now that I'm a little bit more sensitive to, like, oh, that's like not a great comment. And because I don't see comments on my work really at all anymore, that is life, right? You don't actually get the critiques of things until you're either making a difference in the public and needing that criticism, or you don't need criticism all the time. Constructive suggestions are always welcome. And yeah, so these aren't in necessarily the order that I came across them. They're just in at some point I had a logical explanation of where all of these should fit. This one that I came across, that I was like, oh, RSD territory, is modern Spain, a nation, not an empire. I did this in a modernity seminar, discussing about, like, what is modernity? What do we mean when we say modernity? And it was a hard class. We dealt with some really big subjects. I was in third year, and the majority of the class was in fourth year, and they had already done a year within the honors program, which was a more rigorous academic program. My year was the last year that did the rigorous program that had higher credits required within the history department, as well as more emphasis placed on knowing our historiography, so the theory of history, and also needing to there's more emphasis on our graduating essay, or our honors thesis, as we all refer to it. This class was like, it was hard. I felt like a huge imposter for the whole time, and I think this is like this it's December 16th, so it would have been my final essay. Or no, it was my mid-year essay, because this was one that went all year. Oh my gosh, it doesn't remember, but I had like been there for three or 4 months, something like that. So the comments say, as a paper about national unification and the popularization of nationalism in Spain, this paper is very good. The structure is clear, the writing has few flaws, but the paper doesn't connect these themes on nationalism to the themes of the course. The main point of the course was to show that modernity, modernization, modernism were not clear-cut terms. They are ambiguous, used in a great variety of ways. You write of modernization as though it's entirely unproblematic. We read Tip's article in class. We subjected modernization theory to a withering critique. This paper doesn't register any of the debates in the readings and class discussions. Probably. That was probably fair critique of my paper. Fantastic. And I can comprehend that much better as a more mature adult now. I was 20 when I was doing this class, so that was half my lifetime ago, and I probably, that first term of my honors course, and I was, pretty woken up by that. I still got a B, like it's not, and that was it, as I'm like, oh, well, B in honors this honors program is good. Like nobody was getting an A average. Then the next one that I have chosen was that caught my eye, of the many that caught my eye, is Spice. How important was a temptation to history? A review of Jack Turner's Spice, the history of a temptation. I didn't actually read these essays again as I went through them. I was just looking at the comments because I am a perfectionist, and it would really bother me to read my work now. The comments from this professor were very short and brief, which is kind of makes me feel better about the validity of the comments. I'm like, oh, well, yes, you had to justify it somewhere, and yeah. I loved this course. I thought it was really cool. I wish that it had gone a little bit deeper into really understanding how much food impacts us. I think it probably did do that. But I found the discussions lacking in that regard, and that could have been because I am much more of a social historian than the other people in the course. It was an academic focus course. They were very, very much more. I'm trying to think of the right word for this. If it were a house, I would call it ostentatious, but not really in the study, like more rigorous, more like had more experience in having their brains challenged is how I thought. I felt like, oh, well, I had done really well in my small town high school, and now everybody seems to be so much smarter than me because like they were in IB programs or AP, and I had one advanced class that my teacher made up for me, and it was more work rather than more skill. If hopefully I'll do a video on that at some point. So the comments for this are much briefer than the introduction. Some good insights here, but also a lot of repetition and some vagueness. Overall, well done. I feel like I need this comment on a wall somewhere. You have some good insights, but you repeat yourself a lot. And are often vague, not detail oriented. Overall, well done, A-. I think it was something like that where I was like, oh man, yeah, ADHD. Like, yeah, this is like, and also when I'm talking and describing ideas, I'm like, oh, it's like this. But then I get to providing examples and I'm like, well, like that thing and that. And especially as I get older and there's other more mundane things like life, going to work, raising kids, working on relationships and keeping house and that sort of thing. I don't keep track of all the examples that will be part of this larger point that I am making to the world. And as I delve more into who I am and all of that stuff, it's, I have a difficulty in explaining my point of view, my perspective, what my argument is. And I think that a lot of these comments come down to this. I have 2 essays from the same professor, and it is like, these are the notes. I can read this a little bit better than I can read my grandmother's handwriting, but I'd say they're in the same camp. It's an older handwriting, and this is printed. It's not handwritten. And I'm still just like, oh dear, I don't know. So this paper tackles an important subject in an interesting way, looking at the development of the study of women in history as it proceeded through various stages and eventually generated the concept of gender. Makes a lot of sense. The emphasis on Scott is also well judged. Be careful, though, to be sure that each historian theorist you mention is accurately represented in terms of what is said about her or him. Be careful, too, to choose your words of phrasing carefully. Applying just the right term is a central part of getting meaning clear, at projecting those meanings accurately. Maybe that's and projecting those meanings accurately. No. It takes at all times the time to think things through and digest what you've read. There were a lot of things that I had to reread in this class because I didn't understand it. And now, like, as I talk with academic friends now, and anybody who has had to study Foucault, and I bring up Foucault, and I'm like, that man confused me. Everybody seemed confused by him, and that seems very often the case with many philosophers. Foucault, I think, is like the biggest example of that. I remember having to reread sentences of Foucault 3 or 4 times. And now I find out that is because my mind wandered during that time. And so it just makes me feel like I'm not an idiot. My mind works differently. And so being accurate or providing the right description of it is not going to be a huge strength or skill of mine, but that doesn't mean that I don't understand it or that I'm not smart. And I never doubted that I was smart. I did think that I had missed out on a lot of opportunities, like the IP or the AB, or IB or AP, and I don't know. There's like a sense of calm now in understanding that my brain works differently. It's not that I wasn't working hard enough. That's so interesting too, that we like put this, I think that we do though too, like people as a society, we place a lot of our self-worth in our intelligence. And living after this History Honors program, most think I was the only one in our class that didn't go on to more education right away. I needed out. I needed to go and experience the real world. I said, I need 10 years of the real world, and then before I can even consider going back. And now I'm like, oh, I would love to do my doctorate. I'd love to really dig into this and that and all these things. And there's a few other papers here, but there's one that is like, I wanted to share more, but this is getting to be a long, rambly video. And the women's studies course that I took, I felt like the comments from that and everything that I was doing in that, they were above and like, yeah, they were way better than any other essay from my honors course. And that was interesting because it was just a regular course, but it has come up so much more in my life, and I feel like, yeah, I'm supposed to be a critique of society. I'm supposed to be like that social historian that is using like his social historical theory. I don't even know what the historiography is about it, but I'm supposed to be using that to say this is wrong, this isn't okay, and that's why I'm an activist. That's why I will stand up and say, like, call out the BS and fight for there to be change in the little minor mistakes that happen in the world. This summer I've started to make tongue-in-cheek comments about men walking around without their shirt on to my husband, and I'm sure that my kids hear them and are like, what the heck is going on? When I'm like, because that has been said about women, like, oh, like they shouldn't be, how dare they dress like that, and how dare they do this or that, and that hasn't been an issue for probably 8 years, but I'm like, no, like, it's still an issue. It's still like the trauma of my lifetime, of many women in my life, in my lifetime and my generation, that still deal with that idea that what you wear is an excuse for what happens to you, whether you get called beautiful or ugly or whatever, and your worth is in that perspective. And then a man can just walk around with his shirt off and nobody makes a big deal about it. Anyways, so yeah, I don't know. There isn't really anything in this that was good that I can like highlight as like, oh, that's really good feedback. But it was just really interesting to come across this and be like, yeah, I loved that course, and it taught me so much that I have to bring up, and not just when I talk about gender, but when I talk about any social privileges, I use examples from my women's studies course. And I only took one. I should have gotten a degree in that. Maybe I will. I can't imagine where women's studies is now, because there 10 years ago would have been, yeah, this was 2006 that I was taking it. And yeah, like 10-15 years ago, I was like, yeah, like I was studying in my women's studies class in university, which was years ago. You guys are like, society is about a decade behind what I was learning in university, and just on the fringes. And I think that in the information age, it's probably like maybe closer, maybe not quite a decade, because we have more access to information. I don't think that we have more critical thinking, though, which tends to be the problem, unless you're looking at like your echo chamber and you're like, oh yeah, no, the people are thinking, they're being critical. I say this because I don't just want to be like, oh, in case you like, unless you're listening to leftists and then they are thinking critically. Like I when I'm in my echo chamber, I'm like, oh yeah, but I still have some arguments about that. Anyways, whoa, hello, tangent. I came across some some essays from the woman who was my thesis advisor, and because she was the gender historian in the program, and she worked within the body of the history of the body, and that was what I was most interested in doing, and like gender and sexuality and history of the body. And her comments, this must have been like, this is from March 2006, which would have been my first course with her, and the first and only course. I learned so much from this woman, and it's like this, I feel like this is the same stuff that she was saying. My thesis comments. I went through my thesis, just like I leafed through it this morning, and now this evening I'm going through my university essays, and so it's interesting to see that there are some ways of how my writing worked, of how my brain works, that are coming to light in the comments from other people. And this is so regulating birth control, how the Church of England used free will and family values to condone the use of contraceptives. That was the title of my essay. This is a fascinating topic, and one that you found some good materials for. I'm glad that in the end you were able to combine your various interests. One comment about the writing. I would encourage you to think about ways to make this more reader friendly. With linking phrases, clear signposting, identification in a few words, or a brief phrase of new characters and movements being introduced, etc. Think as well about the order in which you need to present your information in order to make proper sense to the reader. For example, there are a couple of places where you refer to new, secular ideas about what we might call happy and efficient heterosexuality. You need to lay out clearly, somewhere near the beginning of the paper, what kinds of movements you're talking about, who is advocating for them, and what they look like. That would make the material that you go on to present much more resonant. These are the same comments that this professor would say on almost every single one of my chapters. Was, okay, go back, reread it, and as the reader, make sense of like, this is where you need to go. And she had this great image for me of how I have this idea and I go around and around, and I get so much more excited about like this other really cool idea, and around and around and around, that I forget where I started. and I forgot what the point is. And so she was like, okay, by the end of your chapter, that's your point. So take that point and put it at the beginning, and then make sure that it all connects. And I'm sure, like in talking with my husband, he learned that in high school, and I was like, I still struggle with that, but I try to remember that as a point. And it's a lot harder to remember that now that I'm not writing as much, but telling stories or talking, and perhaps these like 40 before 40 will help me to come across that, especially looking at the comments of my writing, of how, which are kind of a critique. Writing is an example of how my brain thinks, how I organize ideas and communicate what I'm thinking. So in that way, now, although I'm not writing, I'm not doing any of these on script, I just want to be inspired. Hopefully this will help me to come back to a more succinct way of telling stories and communicating my ideas. So I'm going to toss these, which is kind of scary, because I feel like there was some value in coming across these right now. And now with the new ideas that I have about myself, I have a different perspective on what has happened in my past. But I'm not the same person. And this like sparked a bunch of memories for me. And it's kind of like a nice marker of how much I progressed. I've had that experience. I needed to gain what I did from it at this point. Now I can recycle this and move on. I don't need to keep it in a binder that is taking up space in my life anymore. It's not about who I was or who I am, but it's about changing. Life has changed, and it's interesting to see how much we've changed over time. Thank you for listening as I talk a lot, and I hope you found it entertaining. Bye.